The Indian sun blazed down on the parched grasslands of the Ranthambore Plains, unrelenting in its fury. The cloudless sky stretched endlessly, offering no hope of rain. For 5 months, the worst drought in decades had gripped the region, turning the once lush reserve into a cracked, desolate expanse. A group of tigers, led by the majestic male Raj, had been roaming for 4 days in search of dwindling water sources. Each step was a struggle under the oppressive heat. The tigresses carried their cubs, shielding them from the threat of dehydration. Among them was no cub, but an old man named Arjun, a weathered 78-year-old villager, who had wandered too far from his home in the nearby hamlet of Kalapur, seeking water for his parched fields. On a blistering afternoon, as the tiger group crossed a dry scrubland, a deafening rumble shook the earth. A frantic herd of buffalo stampeded toward them, kicking up clouds of dust that choked the air. The tigers scattered to avoid being crushed, and in the chaos, Arjun, frail and slow, stumbled into a thicket of thorny acacia to escape the charging beasts. When the dust settled and the buffalo thundered past, Arjun emerged, trembling, his weathered face scanning the horizon for the tigers or any sign of familiarity. Only silence greeted him. His hoarse shout for help dissolved into the searing air. The tigers had moved on, too far to hear him. Alone, Arjun's heart sank. His instincts urged him to find his way back to Kalapur, but the drought had erased all familiar landmarks. He shuffled forward, his cracked walking stick probing the ground for any trace of a path. The wind stung his eyes with dust, making navigation nearly impossible. That first night, he huddled beneath a gnarled banyan tree, shivering in the desert's chilling darkness. The distant roars of nocturnal predators echoed, amplifying his fear. Hunger gnawed at his stomach and thirst burned his throat, but terror kept him rooted to his hiding spot. At dawn, thirst became unbearable. Arjun licked the sparse dew from leaves, but it vanished under the rising sun. He trudged across the withered plains, his worn sandals dragging over the cracked earth. Hours bled into one another, his strength fading. His lips cracked, his once sharp eyes dulled by exhaustion. On the second day, delirium set in. He stumbled, collapsing into the dirt, only to rise again, driven by a stubborn will to survive. He found a patch of damp soil, barely a puddle, and scooped the gritty moisture into his mouth. Hunger drove him to chase a scurrying mouse, but his frail limbs couldn't keep up. By midday, on the third day, Arjun was a shadow of himself. His tattered kurta clung to his bony frame, caked with dust and thorns. His ribs protruded beneath his sunken skin. His cloudy eyes barely focused. Each step was a defiance of death. Then a faint scent, metal, petrol, and water, stirred his fading senses. It was enough to spur him onward. The distant hum of engines grew louder, and soon National Highway 52 came into view, a ribbon of blistering asphalt slicing through the barren landscape. To Arjun it was unfamiliar, but the scent of water and humanity pulled him forward. With every ounce of strength, he crawled toward the road. At its edge he collapsed, his frail body motionless under the merciless sun, his shallow breaths the only sign of life. His gaze fixed on the shimmering horizon, where his fate hung in the balance. A battered jeep sped along the empty highway, kicking up clouds of red dust. Inside, Priya Sharma, a 45-year-old wildlife photographer, mopped sweat from her brow, her eyes scanning the desolate plains. For 2 decades, she had documented India's wildlife, but this drought was unlike anything she'd seen. Her driver, Vikram Singh, 50, gripped the wheel with focus. A seasoned guide from the nearby town of Sawai Madhopur, he knew the region's challenges, but this year's drought had brought famine to villages and death to wildlife. Carcasses littered the landscape. Priya and Vikram were headed to the village of Chandapur, hoping to document the drought's toll. As the jeep rounded a bend, Priya spotted a figure crumpled by the roadside. "Vikram, stop," she shouted. They pulled over, and she leapt out, rushing to Arjun's side. His frail form was barely breathing, his eyes half open, clouded with exhaustion. Vikram brought a water bottle, and Priya gently poured a few drops into Arjun's parched mouth. He stirred, his trembling hand reaching for the bottle. They lifted him into the jeep, laying him across the back seat. Priya fanned him with her hat as Vikram drove toward Chandapur's clinic, the only hope for Miles. In Chandapur, the village doctor worked quickly, giving Arjun fluids and tending to his sunburned skin. Slowly, color returned to his face. He mumbled about Kalapur, his home, and the tigers he'd followed in desperation. Priya, moved by his story, promised to help him return once he recovered. Days later, stronger but still frail, Arjun sat under a tree in Chandapur, sipping water and recounting his tale to the villagers. Priya's photographs of him, weathered but alive, became a symbol of resilience in her documentary. Arjun, the old man who survived the Ranthambore drought, returned to Kalapur with a story of survival, forever marked by the tiger's path and the kindness of strangers. The situation. The Indian sun beat down mercilessly as Priya and Vikram's jeep rattled along National Highway 52, loaded with camera gear, food, and water canisters, supplies for their documentary on climate change's devastating effects on rural Rajasthan. Their destination was Chandapur, a village grappling with the drought's toll. Vikram's eyes narrowed as he spotted something ahead on the shimmering asphalt. "Something south on the road," he said, his voice low and urgent, slowing the jeep. Priya strained to see through the heat haze, at first spotting only dust and stones. As they neared, a faint orange shape emerged by the roadside. Her breath caught as she realized what it was. Vikram hit the brakes, the jeep skidding to a halt on the dry earth. They leapt out, the heat forgotten. There, sprawled by the road, was an old man, Arjun, his frail body barely moving, his shallow breaths stirring the red dust caked on his tattered kurta. His sunken eyes were half open, clouded and unfocused, his cracked lips parted, tongue swollen from dehydration. Each breath seemed like it might be his last. Priya, no doctor, but experienced in harsh conditions, knew he was on the edge of death. She rushed to the jeep, grabbing a water bottle from their supplies. Vikram knelt beside Arjun, hesitant to touch him, afraid of causing more harm. Priya returned, kneeling carefully beside the old man. She unscrewed the bottle, the sound of sloshing water stirring a faint reaction in Arjun's face. His eyelids fluttered. She tilted the bottle, letting water drip gently onto his parched lips. At first, most spilled onto the ground, his body too weak to respond. But as a few drops touched his tongue, a spark flickered in his cloudy eyes. With a trembling effort, he lifted his head slightly. Priya adjusted the bottle, and water trickled into his mouth. His bony hand twitched, reaching weakly toward the bottle, as if to grasp the source of life. Water spilled down his chin, soaking his dust-covered beard, each swallow reviving him bit by bit. Vikram and Priya watched in silence, witnessing a fragile miracle unfold as life crept back into the old man's frail frame. After drinking a small amount, Arjun let out a faint groan, not of pain, but of returning awareness. Priya set the bottle down and hesitated, her hand hovering. Years of working in remote areas had taught her to be cautious, but Arjun showed no fear, only exhaustion. His tired eyes met hers grateful, and when her hand gently touched his weathered face, he leaned into it, seeking comfort. Priya and Vikram exchanged a glance, a silent agreement. Their plan to reach Chandapur would wait. They couldn't leave him here. Vikram spread a cloth from the jeep on the ground, and together they carefully lifted Arjun, his body alarmingly light, like a child's. Priya kept dripping water into his mouth as they settled him on a blanket in the back seat. Vikram drove slowly towards Sawai Madhopur's small clinic, avoiding bumps to keep Arjun stable. Priya sat beside him, monitoring his breathing, giving him water sparingly to avoid overwhelming his weakened system. As they drove, a faint light returned to Arjun's eyes, not the dull haze of near death, but a fragile glimmer of hope. The Sawai Madhopur Health Center was a modest, single-story building on the town's outskirts, its whitewashed walls blending into the arid landscape. As the jeep pulled in, a small team of medics, alerted by Vikram's radio call, stood ready. Dr. Anjali Rao, a 60-year-old physician with decades of experience treating rural patients, hurried to the jeep. Her sharp eyes assessed Arjun as Priya and Vikram explained his condition. Without delay, she directed the team to move him inside, where they began administering fluids and checking his vitals. Priya and Vikram waited, their documentary temporarily forgotten, as Arjun's life hung in the balance. Over hours, Arjun stabilized. His breathing steadied. His eyes cleared slightly. He mumbled about Kalapur, his village, and the tigers he'd followed in his desperate search for water. Dr. Rao confirmed he'd suffered severe dehydration, but would recover with care. Priya, moved by his resilience, vowed to help him return home once he was strong enough. Days later, Arjun sat outside the clinic under a neem tree, sipping water and sharing his story with locals. Priya's photos of him, frail but alive, became a centerpiece of her documentary, a testament to human endurance amid climate devastation. Arjun returned to Kalapur, his tale of survival spreading, a story of an old man saved by strangers and the faint scent of water on a desolate road. Dr. Anjali Rao carried Arjun into the small emergency room of the Sawai Madhopur Health Center, her movement steady and practiced. Priya and Vikram followed closely, their faces etched with worry. Inside, the medical team sprang into action, placing Arjun on a cot and beginning a thorough assessment. Dr. Rao checked his pulse, temperature, and breathing, her hands moving carefully over his frail frame for signs of injury. A nurse prepared an 4-drip, while another took a blood sample. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, and exhaustion, Dr. Rao diagnosed, her voice calm but precise. No major injuries, and his organs seemed stable. You found him just in time. Priya and Vikram recounted how they'd spotted Arjun collapsed by the highway, estimating he'd been without water for at least 3 days based on his condition. It's a miracle he's alive, Dr. Rao said, listening to his heart. A man his age can't survive long in this heat without water. He's a fighter. Arjun lay still, his cloudy eyes flickering around the unfamiliar room, settling on Priya. She seemed his only anchor in this strange place. Stepping closer, she rested a hand on his forehead, feeling a faint warmth returning to his skin. Dr. Rao started in 4 with fluids and electrolytes, while a nurse gently cleaned the dust and scratches from Arjun's weathered skin. Every action was careful, as if tending to something fragile and precious, a life teetering on the edge. The next 3 days are critical, Dr. Rao said after the initial treatment. If he makes it through, his chances improve significantly, but he's still in danger. Priya nodded, her gaze fixed on Arjun. She'd seen countless struggles in her work, but something about this old man's resilience struck her deeply, a stubborn will to live against all odds. I'll stay, she said firmly, until we know he's okay. Vikram agreed. Their documentary could wait. This was a story of survival unfolding before them. For 3 days, Priya barely left the clinic. She slept on a chair in the small ward where Arjun rested, hooked to monitors. She helped the staff feed him, starting with sips of oral rehydration solution, then small spoonfuls of soft food as he grew stronger. On the first day, Arjun was barely conscious, his breathing shallow. By the second, he stirred at voices, his head turning slightly when Priya spoke. On the third, he sat up briefly, his trembling hands grasping a cup, and he mumbled thanks in a hoarse voice. His blood tests showed improvement, his eyes grew clearer, and the cuts on his skin began to heal. A spark of his old spirit emerged, quiet stubbornness when urged to drink more fluids. By the end of the 3rd day, Dr. Rao conducted a full evaluation and offered a rare smile. He's out of the worst danger, she said. With continued care, he should recover fully. The news brought relief to the small clinic, a bright spot in a season of hardship. The staff began calling Arjun Dada grandfather, and he became a beloved figure, his story of survival lifting spirits. Priya knew her documentary work couldn't be delayed forever, but she couldn't walk away. After talks with Dr. Rao and the clinic's director, they agreed. Priya would sponsor Arjun's care, covering costs and checking on his progress. In return, she could document his recovery as part of her film on climate change's impact on rural communities. That evening, Priya sat by Arjun's bedside. He reached out, his calloused hand brushing her fingers, a quiet gesture of gratitude. 2 weeks later, Arjun was strong enough to return to Caliper. Priya's photographs of him, frail yet defiant, became a powerful chapter in her documentary, a testament to human endurance in a parched land. Arjun's tale spread through the village, a story of an old man saved by strangers, carried back from the edge by a few drops of water and a shared will to live. Arjun's transformation was nothing short of remarkable. No longer the frail figure teetering on death's edge, the old man now moved with a quiet strength, his eyes sharp with renewed purpose, his weathered face carrying a spark of life. A bond had formed naturally between Priya and Arjun, though Dr. Rao gently reminded her of the delicate balance between care and Arjun's need to reclaim his independence. In the weeks following his recovery at the Sawai Madhopur Health Center, Arjun began relearning the rhythms of village life. Each day brought small victories, fetching water from the community well instead of relying on others, tending to his small plot of land, and sharing stories with neighbors. There were struggles. His body still ached from the ordeal, but each step forward awakened a resilience honed by decades of living close to the land. The day Arjun successfully harvested a small crop of millet from his drought-ravaged field marked a turning point. Standing amid the sparse stalks, his weathered hands gripping the grains, his eyes reflected not just pride, but a profound journey from the brink of death to self-reliance. In that moment, Arjun was no longer just a survivor. He embodied the enduring spirit of those who persist in a harsh land. Arjun's story became more than a tale of survival. It grew into a symbol of human resilience, a testament to the cyclical struggle and renewal in Rajasthan's unforgiving landscape. While the drought had devastated villages, Arjun's recovery offered a flicker of hope that life could endure even in the darkest times. The night before he returned to Caliper, Priya watched him from a distance as he sat with villagers, sharing tea and laughter. He no longer leaned on her for support, a bittersweet sign of his regained independence. "I'll miss you, but this is where you belong," Priya whispered, understanding that true care means letting go, returning someone to their rightful place. When Arjun stepped back into Caliper, hesitating only briefly at the village's edge, the distant chatter of neighbors welcoming him echoed like a call home. He glanced back at Priya and the clinic staff who had accompanied him, a fleeting moment bridging the world of those who saved him and the community he was rejoining. Then, with a steady gait, he walked toward his home, not with fear, but with the quiet resolve of a man who had reclaimed his place. Priya kept in touch through visits and updates from Caliper's elders. Arjun remarkably reintegrated fully into village life. In a community where age often brings isolation, his return was a quiet miracle, embraced by neighbors who saw his survival as a shared triumph. A year later, Priya returned to Caliper for her documentary. She found Arjun tending a small garden, teaching a group of children how to plant seeds in the now-recovering soil. His gentle patience with them mirrored the care he'd once needed, completing a perfect cycle, from a man saved to one who now nurtured others. As Priya filmed, she noticed the rains had finally come to Rajasthan. Green sprouts dotted the once barren fields, and small puddles gleamed under the sky. By the village well, a new sign featured Arjun's image, his hand grasping a water bottle, a symbol of hope. It carried a simple message. In a world battered by climate change, every act of compassion, every drop of water, every moment of care can mean the difference between life and death. Arjun's story was more than one man's survival. It was a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming crises, small human actions can spark profound change. One life, one gesture, one moment of kindness at the right time. Wildlife rehabilitation techniques impact on other species.